Hi there, Tracy with another layout process video. I have the Skinny Love kit here from Scraptastic, which is the kit for the month of September. And as I was reviewing the kit, which should be the video right before this one on my channel, which is just my kit share video, I noticed that there were a lot of really nice, not a lot, but there were a handful of really nice black and gray and white elements. So I decided that my first layout would be a black and white layout, which uses very little to no color. And so I'm just going through those crepe paper ephemera pieces and picking out any of the pieces that are all black or that have a good black component to them. And I thought I might modify or cover up some of the other non-black elements on those. And I picked out the phrase that said the bestest. And I'm thinking about using these Amy Tangerine thickers. They're thicker stickers and they are called Grace. Thinking about using that as my title, one of those as my title, or a couple of them. So first, I'm initially thinking that this grid paper is going to be my background. The grids are made out of yellow lines, and so it's not technically black and white if I use that as my background, but I thought it might make a nice background, so I'm going to try that out first. Just using my little Creative Memories trimmer to trim up my photo. And the photo printed a lot darker than I was expecting it to print, so I'm going to go over to my computer and reprint that in just a second. You'll see me leave, I think. Now, I want this layout to have a vertical feel to it, a very vertical feel to it. So I cut my background paper, not really my background paper, but that pattern paper, which I love from Basic Gray from the Barista collection. I'm just reprinting my photo right now. I cut that so that the lines are going vertical, and I also cut it into a vertical rectangle so that it really emphasizes my vertical look here. Then I'm going to play around with a couple of other ways of making this layout be vertical, and I'll talk about them as I go. So right away, I'm really preferring this gray as the background, the gray cardstock instead of the grid. But before I make my final decision, I'm just going to sit on that for a while and think about my title. So I've decided to use Meet Me in the Sunshine as the title. It was a really super sunny, hot day that we went to the waterfront with our new international students. We have 2 new girls living with us this year. And so our family has really grown. And I wanted this layout to just document one of our first outings with them as a whole family. They had gone out with Scott and the girls before, but this was our first day of the 6 of us spending the day together. So I just reprinted that photo with a little bit brighter. I just adjusted the white balance, I adjusted the levels, and I think I might have bumped up the exposure a tiny bit on it just to get it a little bit brighter, because I want to emphasize that it was a really sunny day, even though it's black and white. So one more try with the grid paper, and I decided I really didn't like that so as much as the gray. So I'm going to go with the gray. But I want to emphasize the fact that this is a vertical layout. So I'm going to trim off a little bit of this gray background paper and make the background not be quite 12 by 12, and see how that leaves 2 lines on the side that just emphasizes the vertical nature. I'm going to make those lines even more obvious by instead of, at first I had taken off a 1/2 inch, which would leave a 1/4 inch on each side. I then took off another 1/2 inch so that this is now a 12 by 11.5 inch piece of paper. And then, excuse my head for a second there, then I'm just going to glue it. And I used my grid mat, the grid on my mat, as a guide for gluing that paper so that there's an even amount of that white on either side. It's not exactly white, it's a grayish white, and it has a pearlized finish to it. It's really pretty. If you wanted to save that paper and get more use out of it on another layout, you could have easily just trimmed off strips to put on the edges, but that seemed like it would be a little bit too finicky with measuring and gluing and that sort of thing. For a second, I considered putting a doily under this, but I decided against it. This is a super quick layout. I did it in an hour, which is really fast for me, and it doesn't have a whole lot to it, but I just wanted to get this one done first with this layout, with this kit, just because I didn't want to use up the black and gray elements on other layouts and then not have enough to do a layout with at the end. So that's why I did this one today. I kind of toyed with the idea of adding some layers here, but I really like the clean graphic nature of this layout as it is, just with the Amy Tangerine stickers being the main dominant embellishment on it. I noticed that a lot of these washi stickers, these are washi stickers from Studio Calico that came in the kit, and a lot of them were predominantly black, so I'm going to cut off some of them so that just the black parts are going to be included in this layout. And so I'm going to have a little cluster of embellishments over there in the upper side of the left part of the layout, and then I'm going to have another little cluster down in the bottom right hand corner of this layout, just to balance it off and give it a little bit more interest than just having all of the elements lined up down the middle. Although I really like the look of all the elements being lined up down the middle. That's really the look I was going for, but I just felt like it needed a little bit more interest. So I thought about maybe painting that piece of cork white and using it as an embellishment down there. I thought about adding some gold, but I'm really trying to get away from using too much color on this one. So technically gold is sort of a color, so I didn't really want to use gold. Then I grabbed the other black. So those two labels that are on the layout, one is over on the left and one is on the right, they're both part of the cut-aparts that are from the exclusive cut-aparts that come in the kit. And so I just took the two that were black, and I'm going to do some sprinkles in opaque white and silver, Mr. Huey's. Before I do that though, I'm just going to take a picture of my layout because I have to take all the pieces off of it so that I don't get any sprinkles on them. And I'm going to do all of my misting in the two places where my clusters will be, as opposed to spreading it all across the layout. So they're just going to cluster around where the clusters go. And that just provides some grounding so that the clustered elements over there aren't just kind of randomly, they don't look randomly slapped on there any old place. The sprinkles make it look like they belong a little bit more. It does take quite a long time for the white opaque Mr. Huey's to dry on cardstock. It sinks into pattern paper quite quickly and dries quite quickly, but I had to use my heat gun just to dry it on the cardstock. So there we go. I'm just going to replace everything. And just trying to get it lined up the way I had it before. I will refer to my photo in a second just to get it the way that it was before. I really liked it the way it was before. It doesn't have to be exact, obviously, but I wanted it to look the same. So now I'm going to do a little bit of journaling / subtitling, depending on, I'm just going to put a word here on this label, and I'm going backwards to spell it because I wanted to end over on the edge of the tag like that, of that label. And these are the authentic letter stickers that came in the kit. So every single thing on this layout came in the kit except for the mists. And so I'm spelling out the word Halifax and I'm spelling it backwards so it'll end in the right place. And now my tag is too long. So I'm just going to cut it and then layer it such that it looks like it's shorter. There you go. So I do that quite often with my labels just to make them the length that I want them to be. And when I place this, I want that white splatter kind of underneath of it to show, and I don't want it to, the edge of it, I don't want the left-hand edge of it to line up with the left-hand edge of the paper. I want it to overlap a little bit. So that was what I was considering when I was placing it there. And I don't want it to be too evenly spaced with the washi tape above and below it either. Where I'm at right now, I just ran over to my sewing machine to run some stitches along it, because this layout is going to have so little embellishment, I just want to take my time to add some details any chance that I can, just to make it look like it's not noticeably less embellished than the other layouts in my album. And I think that there's more room for you to notice those little details when there's less going on in a layout. And so I think that details like stitching and pop dotting and those sorts of things, although I didn't do that on this layout, really make a difference. I did curl the edges of this pattern paper by Basic Gray that I'm about to place, and I'm just using my grid paper to line it up and make sure that it's sort of in the center, as centered as I can get it. And then I also, you can't see because the grid is below where the video shows, but I used the grid to line up the point of the heart so that it was in around the middle part of the layout as well. And now it's just going to take a little bit of spacing. I'm going to put some stitching right there where my fingers were pointing a minute ago. That'll fill up that space between sunshine and the heart because I don't want there to be too much of a gap there. So I'm putting in and the right on the photo. And then the way I have the photo and the word sunshine placed, me looks a little bit too crowded there. So I'm going to move the photo down, which gives me a bit more room to space out the word me above, like have space above and below the word me on the pattern paper. And then that makes me want to shift down the word sunshine. I decided not to shift down the pluses that surround sunshine just because I didn't think they needed to be shifted. And then I put the word meet up on the gray paper. One thing that I did with this layout is the little holes inside of the letters of the words sunshine and me. I didn't pop them out, I just left them black. You just saw me, I'm using my Sharpie marker, which works quite well on washi tape without smudging, but mine is really blobby and inky, and so every time I use it, I just have to take a piece of tissue paper and dry off all the extra ink. Otherwise, ink gets all over my fingers and sometimes it transfers onto my project, and I don't want to do that. So now I'm spelling out the word September, and when I do so, I'm actually realizing that these letter stickers look a lot better when they're layered from the back to the front, just because there's a little bit more space in front of each letter than there is behind each letter on each of the tiles. And so it was the letters were being too far spaced apart the other way. So this way I get to cover up most of that space. So I just spelled out the rest of the word September just by shoving them in behind the letters in front of it. Now I'm going to do that same trick for shortening labels, putting some glue on it and just layering it so that the edge shows. And now I'm going over to my sewing machine and I'm going to run some stitches along that as well. And you'll notice that I left the little pieces of thread hanging off of these. And again, that's just for a little bit more interest. I don't do that every time. In fact, I love that look, but I'm very unlikely to do that most of the time when I stitch. I only do it very, very occasionally. Just because sometimes I find it a little bit too much or a little bit too distracting on my kinds of layouts. I think it looks a lot better on a layout with a lot of air and negative space like this layout has than when it's on a really cluttered, layered layout with not very much negative space. And since that's the kind of layout that I usually do, I tend to not leave my threads hanging. And I'm sorry that there's so much empty space in this video, but this is me going over to my sewing machine and running a couple of stitches along here. Now I thought about leaving these little edges, these little thread ends hanging too, but it just seemed like too much to me, so I trimmed them down. I'm going to put some washi tape over it, and because I'm feeling lazy, I'm just going to take a big fat piece of washi tape and cover it all in one good swoop. So here are the close-ups of this layout. I really love how it turned out. I like that it's predominantly black and white and gray. There are the gray in the stripes of the basic gray paper it's a brownish gray that really picks up nicely on the craft colored background in the letter stickers that I used from Authentique. And that was really just a coincidence, or maybe it's just a reflection of how greatly coordinated the kits are that Jessica puts together for us, because I think that those letters look perfect beside that patterned paper. So thanks so much for watching, everybody, and have a really great scrappy week.